They read my father's will like a weather report, and left my name out like a cloud that never mattered. My name is Eliza Carrow, 32, civil engineer by training, maker of small strong things by stubborn practice. I grew up in a shingled house on Harbor Lane, a place that smelled of cedar, tide, and coffee, where my father, Thomas, taught me how to fix hinges and measure twice. After my mother died, he remarried Margaret Finch, a lacquered woman with a tidy smile that chipped when she was tired. She arrived with her son, Graham, glossy and already good at claiming space. I learned to fold mine small. I left for college with a scholarship and a wrench set wrapped in a bandana. My father hugged me, whispered that he was proud, and tucked a paper into my wallet, a list of tools he loved most, numbered like commandments. "You're good with the small parts," he said. "Good with storms." It felt like a blessing. In time the house turned quieter for me. Calls became texts. Margaret managed the calendar and decided when holidays would be smaller. Graham called me the practical one, which meant the unglamorous one, the one who still used her hands. When my father's heart failed on a gray Saturday in February, the tide pulled out and did not return. I arrived to casseroles stacked like bricks on the counter and a hushed committee of neighbors. Margaret wore black and nodded at me across the living room, a little tilt of mercy that barely reached her eyes. Graham guided me through condolences like a docent, steering me away from rooms, away from the study, away from anything that might require history. "We'll take care of things," he said, his palm resting too long on my shoulder. "You know how it is." I knew. I had always known. The first wound was not the missing invitation to help, it was the idea that I would accept it. I slept on a friend's couch, then returned to my small apartment above the workshop I rented on Hickory Street. The day after the funeral, a cream envelope arrived from the estate attorney, embossed and careful. The reading of the will would be on Thursday, 10 in the morning, at Hawthorne and Pike. I cleared my schedule, rolled the stiffness from my hands, and ironed a black dress that still smelled faintly of a wedding I once attended alone. On Wednesday night, Margaret called. Her voice was smooth, practiced. "Eliza," she said, "I imagine you're busy. Graham and I spoke with Mr. Hawthorne. It seems these matters are quite procedural. It may be simpler if you do not attend. We'll keep you informed." "I'll be there," I said. Silence pulsed. "If you insist," she replied, and the line clicked quiet. I arrived early, breath handled, palms steady. The conference room had a long table and coastal paintings pretending to be windows. Mr. Hawthorne, pale and thinning, shuffled papers while Margaret slipped into a chair and Graham adjusted his cuff links like a stage cue. There were a few cousins I barely knew, faces arranged into sympathy. Hawthorne began. He read the document with the solemn wish of an old actor who did not believe in the play. House to Margaret. Brokerage account to Graham. A charitable donation to the Maritime Museum. Keepsakes distributed by the widow's discretion. It went on like that, a tidy map that never included me. My name did not surface. When the last page turned, the room exhaled. Margaret's hand found Graham's sleeve. I watched the lacquered calm in her posture, the way victory settled without surprise. Mr. Hawthorne looked up as if seeing me for the first time. "Miss Carrow," he said, "I'm terribly sorry for your loss." "For my father," I said. Then I stood, thanked him, and left. On the street, March wind lifted my hair and stung my eyes. Somewhere a gull jeered. A thought steadied inside me, small and sharp as a nail caught between teeth. Something had been moved that should not have been moved. That was the first spark. Grief has a schedule that ignores appointments. It arrived at 4 in the morning, when the pipes knocked and the city exhaled. It sat across from me at breakfast, a blunt guest, while the toaster kept misjudging the bread. During the day, I worked. I measured storefronts for a string of restorations, inspected hairline fractures in steps, and used resin to bind cracked banisters like bones. Work was a clean language. It asked for exactness and offered progress. The world around me continued with brisk normalcy. Margaret posted a tasteful message online about Thomas's legacy and community service, accompanied by a photograph where I did not exist. The neighbors brought over more food. A cousin texted a heart and a ship's wheel. Graham called once, clipped and satisfied. "Just wanted to be sure you're okay," he said. "I'm working," I answered. He didn't ask where. He never had. In the evenings, I returned to my workshop, a long room with high windows and a scarred bench. On the wall hung my father's list of tools, taped there for years. Hammer, level, calipers, block plane, patience. I cleaned the plane until it shone. I counted screws. I told myself that an omission could be an error, though my blood did not believe it. My friends were kind. "Fight it," Mara said, practical as ever. "Hire someone. The law is paper and process." I nodded but hesitated, brittle with exhaustion. I imagined Margaret's expression, the crisp shrug, the implied accusation that I wanted a handout. Pride is a difficult companion, and it sat beside me stubbornly, arms crossed. The house on Harbor Lane lived in my sleep. I walked its hallways, passing the study where my father taught me the feel of good wood, the patient draw of a blade. I passed the threshold to the backyard where he hammered stakes for tomatoes, his laugh steady, his hands careful. In every dream, the study door was closed. On Sunday I drove by the house like a person circling a shoreline they once swam. The cedar shingles had weathered into silver. The hydrangeas were stubs. Margaret's car was not in the driveway. The mailbox still said Carrow in a faded serif my father had stenciled himself. I parked 3 streets away and sat still until my breath learned its pace again. What would dignity require, I asked myself. Not submission. Not theatrical rage. Something clean, something firm. Truth felt like a floor under my feet, but I needed a blueprint. I went home and opened a box I had avoided, the one I packed the night the hospice nurse said it was time. It held my father's scattered papers, a leather notebook, 3 bills, an old letter signed with a joke. I placed them with care on the table and made tea. There is an art to sorting the afterlife of a life. Receipts are temporal. Notes are weather. The notebook mattered. In it, he drew measurements for a skiff he never built and listed items to repair in the house. In a margin, he had written a phone number with no name. Underneath, a date, circled twice, from last autumn. I traced it with my finger. My chest tightened. I called the number the next morning, voice steady as possible. "Hello," a woman answered, warm, low. "Hi," I said. "My name is Eliza Carrow. I think you may have worked with my father. He died last month." A pause, then a breath. "I'm sorry," she said. "He was a good man. This is Maya Rourke. I'm an attorney, estate and trust. We spoke last fall." He asked questions about codicils. The words slid into the room like a key. I sat straighter. "What did he ask?" I said. "The right things," she answered. "If you want to come by, we can talk." That night, I placed my father's plane back on the pegboard, set my hands on the bench, and promised the room something simple. I would find what had been moved. I would put it back without shouting. Maya Rourke's office sat above a florist, the air sweet with damp petals and powder. She wore a charcoal suit and carried grief like a familiar client, respectful, never arousing it. Her desk held neat stacks and a cup with 3 pens, all identical. She listened the way good carpenters measure, without hurry, careful to square what you say with what might be true. I knew your father wanted to update his will, she said. He scheduled a meeting in October. He mentioned you by name. He wanted the house preserved until you had a chance to decide your future. He spoke about a scholarship. He spoke about fairness. Fairness, like levelness, like a beam settling without tilt. I swallowed. What happened? I asked. He cancelled the meeting 2 days later, she said. He emailed that Margaret preferred their longtime attorney to handle it. He said he would draft a letter to attach as a memorandum of wishes, at least, while he sorted the rest. Maya slid a folder across the desk. Inside lay a printed email, formal and kind, with his exact phrasing. Beneath it, a copy of a letter on his stationery, dated and signed, witnessed by 2 neighbors I knew by their dogs' names. In it, my father wrote of the house's history, asked that it not be sold immediately, and set out a gift to me from a small investment account he kept separate from the household funds. He asked that his tools remain together, and that the workshop be offered to me first. It was not a full codicil, but it carried weight. Attached memoranda are not binding the way a codicil is, Maya said, but they are persuasive. There is more. He transferred funds into a separate account in your name, to be released upon his death. The bank flagged it because the beneficiary form had an error, a missing initial. They sent the revision to his house. We can ask the bank for their records. I felt the seat beneath me, the shape of proof forming like a beam laid across 2 supports. We drove to the bank together, gray sky like brushed steel. The manager, a woman with careful hair and a blunt sincerity, confirmed the account existed, confirmed the error, confirmed that notice had been mailed. She pulled a scan of the signed correction from the system. My father's handwriting, practiced and steady, was there with the date from November. The beneficiary, Eliza Marlowe, he had dropped the E. The bank had corrected it internally, but the estate attorney had not listed this asset in the inventory. It was not a fortune. It was a clean sum that would buy time, buy choice, buy dignity. Maya printed the authenticated record with a bar code and bank seal. She made copies of the memorandum of wishes and the email trail. She drafted a letter to Hawthorne and Pike requesting a supplemental inventory and asking for the memorandum to be appended to the estate file. Her tone was not dramatic. It was exact. I do not promise battles, she said. I promise process. You decide how much noise you want to make. Very little, I said. Enough for truth. We filed the letter by courier. That evening, I sat in my workshop and read my father's words again, the way he asked that the cedar bench stay in the family, the way he hoped his daughter would keep the tools. Tears came like a tide, not violent, only certain. I cleaned each handle with oil until the grain came alive. I dated a new page in my notebook and wrote 2 tasks. 1. Secure the account. 2. Protect the workshop. 2 days later, Hawthorne's office replied with a meeting notice, addressed to Margaret, to Graham, and to me. The subject line was colorless. Request for clarification. Margaret texted a single sentence, "This is unnecessary." I did not reply. Maya and I reviewed the likely moves. We would ask for inclusion of the bank asset. We would argue that the memorandum reflected intent, that delaying the sale of the house was prudent, that the workshop was not a set of keepsakes to be parceled privately. She coached me on silence, on choosing only precise words, on letting paper speak. Quiet is not weakness, she said, gathering the documents into a slender, heavy folder. Quiet is weight. I slept well for the first time in weeks. Morning light reached the high windows of my workshop and made the suspended dust look like salt. I packed the folder into a canvas bag, set my father's level inside as if it were a talisman, and tied my hair back with the old bandana. I locked the door. On the step, I felt steady, a beam settling, a house finding plumb. The second meeting took place in the same room with the same paintings, as if the ocean outside had not moved at all. Margaret arrived in navy, her grief precise. Graham wore a tie with tiny anchors, a little on the nose. Mr. Hawthorne's assistant poured water. Maya sat beside me, quiet geometry in a dark suit, hands still. Hawthorne began with throat-clearing sentences about supplemental inventories and administrative clarity. He mentioned Maya's letter, his expression neutral. There appears to be an account that was not listed, he said. The bank has confirmed the beneficiary designation. Margaret's smile did not reach her eyes. We were not aware, she said. Maya slid the bank's authenticated printout across the table. Now you are, she said, voice low. Graham leaned forward. It cannot be much, he said. It is exactly what it is, Maya replied. It is also dispositive. Hawthorne moved delicately to the memorandum. He read my father's words in a dry cadence, as if they were a weather report again. Ask that the house not be sold for at least 1 year. Offer the workshop to Eliza first, as steward of the tools and bench. Consider a scholarship at the trade school in his name from the remainder. Signed, witnessed, dated. This is not binding, Margaret said. We honored his wishes already. You honored what was convenient, Maya said. She did not lift her eyes. The memorandum is part of the record now. The court will note it. I watched the words pass like clean boards set in place. I did not ask for speeches. I did not ask for apologies. I rested my hand on the canvas bag where my father's level lay, cool and present. Hawthorne cleared his throat again, eyes on Margaret. Given the memorandum, I recommend we register an agreement, he said. The house can be maintained for 1 year. The workshop to Ms. Carrow. The bank asset transfers immediately. The charitable bequest can be structured after. Margaret's mouth thinned. The house requires upkeep, she said. Who will pay for that? I will, I answered, my first word since we Saturday, the asset will cover taxes and utilities. I will handle maintenance. Graham scoffed softly. You renovated apartments, he said. A house is different. Maya did not look at him. She renovates lives, she said. And tools travel. The room thinned into stillness. Margaret's gaze met mine, not angry, only calculating a new shape. Your father was sentimental, she said, softer than I expected. He wanted everything and nothing at once. He wanted time, I said. He taught me how to make it. Silence did what I had hoped it would do. It pressed. It asked what noise could not. Hawthorne drafted language, his pen moving like a carpenter's pencil on fresh lumber. He read it aloud, each clause precise. Margaret nodded once, economical, as if tipping her hat to a stubborn sea. Graham signed with an impatient flourish. When the folder closed, no one clapped. We stood. Margaret extended her hand. I took it. Her fingers were cool. I hope you find peace, she said. I am making it, I replied. Maya and I stepped into the corridor where a window offered a sliver of the actual harbor, a real line of water with real light. She placed the signed copy in my bag and clicked her pen with satisfaction. You did not raise your voice, she said. I did not need to, I said. Justice, when it lands, is not loud. It is a beam set true, weight carried without chatter. We left by the stairs, feet solid on each tread, the world arranged in right angles for the length of one flight. Spring arrived like a craftsman, measured and intent, laying light across the floors of my workshop. I signed the transfer papers at the bank, the manager recognizing me by name now. The funds moved with quiet finality, a current correcting its course. I paid the taxes on the house and scheduled a roofer to replace the tired shingles that had leaked above the study for years. I swept the workshop on Harbor Lane until it remembered its original footprint, then carried my father's tools from Hickory Street to their first home, each one wrapped in the bandana he had given me. The plane gleamed. I called the trade school and met with a director who wore fatigue frankly, debt figures living under her eyes. We drafted the beginnings of a scholarship in my father's name for students entering carpentry or marine repair, people who also heard the steady music of patient work. Small awards matter, she said. They keep the light on while someone learns. I nodded. He would have liked that. On the way out, I ran my hand over a rough newel post in the entry and felt potential waking through the grain. The house did not become a shrine. It became a project. I catalogued everything. The bent nails in the coffee tin. The map with greasy fingerprints. The cracked pane in the laundry room that made a whistle in November. I repaired what was broken, and I left alone what held. On Sundays I opened the windows and let the harbor air move through rooms that had been sealed by old arguments and quiet erasures. Wind finds the hidden corners and clears them. Dust swirled and then settled. Margaret wrote twice. The first time, she forwarded an old utility bill that had been misdirected. The second time, she sent a note that said, in careful script, "Thank you for preserving the study." He lived there. I replied with a photocopy of the scholarship draft and a line, "He still does." Graham did not write. I did not wait for it. People came by, shy at first. Mr. and Mrs. Tully from 2 houses down brought a pie and admitted they had witnessed the memorandum. We felt strange, keeping it to ourselves, Mrs. Tully said, eyes wet. We were told it was private. I thanked them. Privacy can be a gentle word for silence that helps power. Truth can be a quiet neighbor who waits for the door to be opened. We shared the pie and told stories that were not exaggerated, just tender. I kept working downtown. The benches I restored began to carry the weight of strangers again. The bank account gave me room to turn down work that asked me to rush and say yes to work that asked for care. I slept deeper. At night, the house swelled with its old warmth. In the mornings, I made coffee in the small kitchen and looked out at the narrow garden my father used to keep. I cleared it, turned soil heavy with memories, planted tomatoes and beans, and a row of marigolds because they are stubborn little sons. My hands remembered the right angle between handle and wrist, the sweet ache a good day's labor gives. On the first truly warm morning, I found the level my father had etched his initials into, TC, hidden behind a stack of sanding discs. It was the one I had carried like a talisman to the meetings with Maya. I balanced it on the windowsill and watched the bubbles settle perfectly between lines. A level does not argue. It tells the truth and waits for you to meet it. Mara visited and stood in the study doorway, mouth open. It feels like him, she said. It feels like work, I answered. She laughed, wiped her eyes, and handed me a plant in a clay pot. For the window, she said. It likes morning light. I placed it on the sill beside the level. The room felt complete in a new way, as if it had accepted the next chapter without bitterness. All day, I sanded a scarred tabletop until the grain lifted like a map of a safe coastline. At dusk, I set the table in the kitchen and ate a simple meal while the garden pressed its new green against the glass. Grief still visits. It sits at the end of the bench and waits, less heavy now, more companion than anchor. When I think of my father, I see his hands showing me how to sight a straight line by eye, how to trust the tool but also the feel. He knew something about quiet vengeance without saying the word. He knew that making is a kind of answer. In the end, no one was ruined. The house stayed. The tools stayed. The scholarship will begin in the fall. My name returned to the paper where it should have been, not as a trophy, only as a simple fact. That is the justice I wanted, and it was enough. Morning light enters the study and touches the level. The bubble centers, true and calm. I run my fingers along the bench and begin another repair, listening for the small song wood sings when it has been set right. If this story touched you, share your thoughts below. And subscribe for more stories of quiet revenge.